All right, this is video number 2 of week 15, and in this video we're going to talk about intellectual property. And I'm just going to move my microphone. You might hear some sound. There goes the microphone. That was kind of cool. And I still have good audio, so I didn't pull a cable out. We're going to talk about intellectual property, and then we're going to talk about a little bit about piracy, and then ergonomics, and a little bit about emotional health. Okay, so let's knock those out. So intellectual property, there's a whole category of property. And so humans like to categorize stuff. We call this ontology, right? Ontology is the existential nature of being, but it's also, interestingly, the definition of ontology, like creating categories for stuff. So the branch of metaphysics dealing with the nature of being. That's like really awesome kind of word. And if we look at what metaphysics mean, I'm just going to search Google for metaphysics. The branch of philosophy that deals with the first principles of things, including abstract concepts such as being, knowing, substance, cause, identity, time, and space. So I'm actually a pretty metaphysical guy when I read that definition. That's like my new favorite word right now. But the other definition of ontology is a set of concepts and categories in a subject area or domain that shows their properties and the relations between them. And so humans like to create ontological structures. We've talked about this. And an ontological structure is breaking things down and showing into categories and showing how they're related. And so in property and ownership, which is in and of itself kind of a strange idea, ownership, right? Ownership is an idea. It's a concept. It's this idea that humans and some humans created, and now it's kind of manifested all around the world. Right? But this idea of ownership is an idea. And so to get metaphysical about it, and metaphysics is the branch of philosophy that deals with the first principles of things, including abstract concepts, such as being, knowing, substance, cause, identity, time, and space. Right? But to get metaphysical about it, like, here's reality, and then here are all these ideas that we put on top of reality, right? And so reality is that there's land, there's a river, there's a sky, there's, this cap from Canon, there's my tea mug, right? This is reality. And then the idea that I own these, this is mine. That's an idea, right? Reality is it's just a cup. But the concept, the idea of ownership is an idea, it's a concept. And so, just to like get philosophical about this, there's this Chief Seattle speech, right, about ownership, and it's it's kind of like if you go to like things that debunk things, it's kind of like probably not true, but the city of Seattle is named after Chief Seattle. And it was weird to the Indian people, this idea of ownership, and that was very true. Like they didn't understand ownership, and so the white man came over. He said, "Hey, we'll give you all these beads for this land, and then we'll own the land." And the Indians are like, "What? Whatever. That makes no sense, you crazy white people." And so this speech, whether or not Chief Seattle gave it or not, it is written apparently to George Washington or somebody, I don't know, when they were like, we want to buy this area of land up by Seattle where Seattle is now. And so this was Chief Seattle's response. And it's basically saying, we don't know what you're talking about when it comes to ownership. Our great father, I'm just looking here. Yeah, you could read about history links. Let me see. Let me just search for own. Let me search for sky. Anyhow, it's kind of a beautiful speech, and there's different versions of it. Chief Seattle's letter, CSUN. Oh, the president in Washington sends word that he wishes to buy our land, but how can you buy or sell the sky, the land? The idea is strange to us. If we do not own the freshness of the air and the sparkle of the water, how can you buy them? Every part of the earth is sacred to my people, every shining pine needle, every sandy shore, every mist in the dark woods, every meadow, every humming insect, all are holy in the memory and experience of my people. We know the sap which courses through the trees as we know the blood that courses through our veins. We are part of the earth, and it is part of us. The perfumed flowers are our sisters. The bear, the deer, the great eagle, those are our brothers. The rocky crest, the dew in the meadows, the body heat of the pony, and man all belong to the same family. The shining water that moves in the streams and rivers is not just water, but the blood of our ancestors. If we sell you our land, you must remember that it is sacred. Each glossy reflection in the clear waters of the lakes tells of events and memories in the life of my people. The water's murmur is the voice of my father's father. The rivers are our brothers. They quench our thirst. If we sell you our land, remember that the air is precious to us. This we know. Earth does not belong to man. Man belongs to the earth. All things are connected like the blood that unites us all. Man did not weave the web of life. He is merely a strand in it. Whatever he does to the web, he does to himself. So anyhow, it's kind of beautiful, but they're basically saying we don't know what ownership is. And that was true when the white people came over. The Indians were a bit mystified by ownership. And you know, I think it's interesting just to reflect upon that. And it's a bit of a tangent that we could go down, because when I was in high school, I really liked studying some things in history. And so one of them was the Native Americans and what happened to them and the eradication of an entire people who were on this continent before the Europeans came here, my ancestors. And like the Trail of Tears and germ warfare, you know, waged against the Indians to annihilate them. So our history as a nation is steeped in blood, and it was the annihilation of a civilization that was here before us, which, you know, is the history of our country. And I think that's, you know, important to acknowledge just where we come from and that history. So getting back to intellectual property, this idea of ownership, it's an idea. And then we create an ontological structure of ownership. And so there's ownership of real property. And this is real property. You ready? Here's the test. It made a sound. That's real property. That's real, right? Anything that you could touch is real. It's real property. And real estate. So real estate comes from this idea of real property. It's real. It's real estate. And that's real property. And then there's intellectual property, and intellectual property are ideas. And so everything I've just shared here is an idea. It's intellectual property, and I own it, right? In American law, right, any idea that you come up with, you own. Now, proving that ownership might be difficult. And there's ways that you can prove that ownership. And so we have ownership, the main category, and then forking off of that, two branches, we've got real property and we have intellectual property. And so, right, we broke ownership down into two categories. And just set my keyboard aside so I can get a little closer. Move on up. And then we break intellectual property down into some categories. But here are some of the things that fall into the category of intellectual property. So a book, a screenplay, a movie, a song, poetry, software code that you created. Like, these are all things of an intellectual nature, meaning you can't grasp them. Yes, you might be able to pick up, you know, a book, the paper that a book was written on, but that which has value is not this paper, right? It's the ideas that the pen has inked out on the page, you know? Or when you think of music, right? It's not the CD or whatever that, you know, is valuable. It's the song that's on there. And so, like, the lyrics, the rhythm, the beat, the tempo, however that person created that song, Bruce Springsteen, I've got the fortunes of heaven and diamonds and gold. I got all the riches, baby, that the bank can hold. I got houses across the country, honey, running end to end, and everybody, buddy, wants to be my friend, right? Like, that's intellectual. You can't grab it. I could grab this. This is real property. I can't grab that song. I could get the CD that it's printed on, but what has value is not the CD. It's the song. It's the idea. It's the way it's expressed. So that's intellectual property. Songs, movies, screenplays, novels, books, poetry, software, right? This all falls into intellectual property. So we have real property, or we have ownership. And in ownership, we break that out into real property and intellectual property. And then in intellectual property, there's ways in which we can protect our intellectual ideas and that we can prove ownership. And so some of those things that we do are copyrights. Some of the ways we protect ideas are copyrights, trademarks, and patents. And so a copyright is, the right to copy something. If you have the copyright, you have the right to copy it. So software, right? Like Microsoft might get the copyright on its software, Microsoft Windows, or Microsoft Office, Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel. And so they are the ones who own the right to copy it. So if I buy that software, I don't then own the software. I own a license to use that software under certain conditions. And usually it's like on your personal computers. If I made copies of that software and went out to the corner of Blackstone and Shaw and was like, hey, come buy Microsoft Office, come buy Microsoft Windows, the police would come and shut me down, right? Because I'm selling something that's not mine. I didn't buy the software. I bought the right to use the software on my personal computers. I bought a license to the software. And so the person who owns the software, the company that owns the software, is Microsoft, and they have the right to copy it. Same is true with movies. Same is true with songs. Same is true with anything of intellectual property nature. You can get a copyright on it. And the way you get a copyright is you just go to like US copyright, right? And you Google it, if I could type, which apparently I can't, US copyright. And you go in here and you file a copyright, and it's like maybe $50, and you upload your document online. And then, you have a copyright. Automatically, when you create something, you own it, okay? But then if you file for a copyright, when it comes time to prove ownership in a court of law, so let's say you write a novel, and then you just kind of set that novel aside, and maybe email it to a couple of people, like, oh yeah, I wrote this book, feel free to read it, and you never do anything with it. And then one day you realize that your novel is a New York Times bestseller, but it's got somebody else's name on it. So you emailed it to somebody, and maybe they emailed it to somebody else, and then that person took it and made it their book, and it became an NYT bestseller. And you go, hey, but that's my book, right? And the court say, can you prove it? And then if you could find the original email that you sent on a certain date, right, where you sent it as attachment, well, that's pretty good proof. But maybe you got that copy from the person who originally wrote it. They say they wrote it. So maybe they say, well, I wrote this back in the 80s, and I sent it to Todd. And then Todd sent it to other people saying it was his. I don't know what's wrong with him. And they're like, can you get that email? I can't find it. Right? So then it becomes kind of like a who said what, right? It becomes hard to prove ownership. But if you had taken your novel and uploaded it to the government's website and paid $50, you could say, yeah, I owned it. I uploaded it to the government's website, and the government could say, yep, you did on this date. Here it is. And they could say, okay, you own it. And so that's how copyright protects you. $50, right? Kind of money-making operation for the government, I guess. So that's a copyright. A trademark is a mark by which a company does trade. And so here are some trademarks. And so, these companies don't want anybody else using their trademark because they want to protect their brand. So I can't go out and make like a BMW scooter, right? And be like, yeah, this is the BMW scooter. It's totally cool. It's a little push scooter, right? BMW engineering, it's amazing, right? Because BMW would be like, no, we didn't make that. They don't want their brand diluted. They don't want it degraded. They don't want it defiled, right? They want their brand to stand for something, right? The finest engineering, German engineering. And so they own the right. They own the trademark. They own the right to put that mark on their trademark. That's the mark by which they do trade. So that's a trademark. And you could get a trademark. Again, you just search US trademark and you upload documents and you kind of show this is what my trademark is. And they say, okie dokie. And then they file it. And then you have to police it. You have to make sure nobody else is using it. That's trademark. And then finally, a patent is for like engineering inventions and things like that. You're going to upload documents that say, hey, here's my idea, here's how it works, here are the blueprints and the schematics, and so that's what a patent is, right? So it's for those kinds of things, better mousetrap kind of a deal. So why do we want to protect intellectual property, right? And what that comes down to is a trade-off between private and public interest. And so civilization, a nation, a culture really wants to offer intellectual property protection because that incentivizes people to create things of an intellectual nature. Let me say that again. A country wants to provide intellectual property protection because that incentivizes people to create things of an intellectual nature. So, by offering people intellectual property protection, they will invest money to write software. That's great, right? If there wasn't that protection, as soon as they wrote it, somebody else could start selling it, and then, they won't be able to recoup their investment. Drug companies can do research and spend millions and billions of dollars trying to create new drugs. and then they're the only ones who could sell them because, right, they own the intellectual property on it, and then that benefits humanity and society because this new medical treatment is available, and so intellectual property protection incentivizes people to create things of an intellectual nature, to invest time in being a musician also, or in writing a book or a screenplay or creating a movie. Right? People can invest in those endeavors and then recoup the investment because they have the protection. Not all countries protect intellectual property. And their reason for doing that is they're a struggling economy, and they decide that it's better to allow everybody in their culture, their country, to go ahead and just steal all of the intellectual property from other cultures and countries and share it widely and freely, and not persecute anybody for making copies of Microsoft Office or for bootlegging movies and sharing them, or CDs, because this enhances their ability to start learning these tools and using these tools, and hopefully propels their economy and their culture forward. But the idea would be once their economy and culture, country got to a more progressed state, they would then offer intellectual property protection so that they can incentivize people to create things of an intellectual nature. So that's the bit on copyrights, patents, and trademarks and ownership. It's kind of an interesting field. Piracy is when you violate intellectual property by stealing something of an intellectual nature, right? Like software piracy or music piracy or movie piracy. So piracy is stealing something of one form of piracy, stealing something of intellectual property, right? That's it. That's the end of the definition. One form of piracy is stealing something of an intellectual nature, intellectual property. So this is also kind of why it's so important when you writing papers that you give credit to where you found some information. If you quote something, you don't try to pass it off as your own and plagiarize. All you got to do is put a little footnote in, say this came from this person, put quotes around it. So there's information about plagiarism. You can pause the video and read that. All right, let's talk about ergonomics. So ergonomics, if you look up ergonomics, it's the study of people's efficiency in their working environment. And it's important to have good ergonomics. And you can see here, oh, that's a really nice picture. I like that picture. She's kind of all skeletal a little bit. It's important to have good ergonomics because if you don't have good ergonomics, you could get a repetitive stress injury, RSI. And that means your fingers stop working. You've got a nerve in here, and too much pressure on the wrist creates damage to that nerve, and that nerve stops working, and your fingers stop working. You get tingling up your arm, and then you have to get this awful surgery. And I'm just looking to see if it shows any pictures of the surgery because it looks pretty gross. I just want to scare you into never doing it or into taking care of your body. They took out all the gross pictures. They used to have really gross pictures when you Google this. Anyhow, yeah, trust me, you don't want. So I guess this is one. They're kind of opening up somebody's thing to get into nerve. But once you lose that ability to, your fingers won't ever come back to full ability. And so the way you do this, the way you have a good ergonomic station when it comes to computers is you want to have a good ergonomic station so you don't have these problems. So here's a bad one, right? So you can see like wrong, right, and correct. And here, right angles, right angles, right angles, right angles, right angles, no pressure on the wrist there. And here's wrong, right? Bends, right? Just, and the right way is to have like right angle here, right angle here, right angle here, right angle here, right angle here. You're looking straight across or down, right? Straight across or down when you're at your computer. So I have this board here, and on this board I have my keyboard and my mouse. It's literally just a piece of wood that I got at Home Depot or Lowe's or wherever. And that way, with this board, it's right on my lap. And so when I'm sitting at my computer, my arms, right, you can't really see this, but my arms are pretty much in this position right here, because that keyboard's right on top of my legs. And I'm looking straight across my screen and down. But you have to make sure that, you have a good workstation. And this would be, as opposed to if I had this up on my desk, now I'm like this, right? And my hands are up here, and it's tied up here. It's not good. So you just want to make sure you have a good ergonomic workstation. That's the takeaway from all of everything I just said. And that'll keep you from getting carpal tunnel syndrome. Don't put pressure on your wrists right here. Keep your wrists straight. Like if you ever took piano, you heard that. Same with computers. All right, and then finally, last thing we're going to talk about is emotional health. A lot of things on the internet to look at, and not all of them are that great for you. Some of them can do damage, and that to which you expose your mind, right, impacts your mind. And so if you look at the wrong things, it could incline your mind in the wrong direction. And so you want to be careful what you look at and be aware of what you're looking at and question the source of what you're looking at. And this includes like news articles, and is this true? And are those really bad people over there? And who is saying this, and why might they be wanting to convey this message? This includes like not looking at pornography, or if you do look at pornography, choosing the pornography you look at, because it could be a rabbit hole. And then pretty soon you just keep, and that's really strong positive reinforcement, sexuality is. And so if you're strongly positively reinforcing yourself, like with content which is not healthy for the mind, that could, it's going to incline the mind in an unhealthy direction. So, all of that stuff, right? Whatever you're looking at, there's all kinds of dark traps and pits in this world, and plenty of them are also found online. So you have to protect yourself from yourself, and exercise some restraint in what you allow yourself to do online. And that just helps you with your emotional health, including how much time you spend online, and turning your screens off like an hour or two before bed, and not obsessing about social media and about who posted what, and are you getting enough likes, you just have to kind of take it all with a grain of salt, and make sure you're using the tool and that the tool is not using you. So we get back to that message from the beginning of this course. And, not texting and driving, right? Like you got to be able to know how to use the tool. Not get addicted to the internet or to, Minecraft or whatever. World of Warcraft, is that it? All right, so it's week 15. Good job on you. If you're watching all this, you're learning some good stuff. I'm glad to have you in this class. We got like a couple weeks left, so get on it. Do your work, people. Do your work, and finish strong. I'm super excited you're here, and I applaud you for forwarding your education. You're doing the right thing. See you next week.